And good evening. Today is February the 3rd. Right now it is 7:30, and I'm calling to order this evening's meeting of the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission. For the benefit of those who have not participated in a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, our procedures are as follows. The Secretary will read the legal notice of the meeting as published in local newspapers. The applicant will be invited to come forward and present the case, explaining to the Commission and others present what is being requested of this property. Comments of town agencies will be read for each application if there are any. First, there'll be clarifying questions from the commissioners, and next there'll be an opportunity for clarifying questions from the audience. Next, we'll ask those who want to support the application to come forward. Second, we'll ask those opposing the application to come forward. As this is a public meeting and must be recorded, it'll be necessary for speakers to identify themselves by stating their name and address before addressing the commission. The applicant will then be free to leave or remain for the balance of the public hearing and the regular meeting, during which time the commission will try to reach a decision on each application. Each applicant will be notified in writing as to the decision of the commission and has the right to appeal to Superior Court if desired. Decisions of this meeting are available the day after the meeting by calling the Planning and Zoning Office at 203-453-8039 after 9 a.m. I'd like to introduce the following members of the Guilford Planning and Zoning team. We have Richard Wallace, George Underhill, Tom Cost.
Hi.
Hi. I'm Rich Meyer, Phil Johnson, Josh Hirschman, Frank DeAndrea, George Crowell, Reggie Reed, Walter Corbiere, and Lisa Marie Brewer. Michael Graziano is running the cameras for us tonight. Mr. Secretary, would you give us the legal notice?
Notice is hereby given that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on February 3rd, 2016 at 7:30 p.m. at the location of the Nathaniel B. Green Community Center, 32 Church Street, Guilford, Connecticut, Monunketuck Room on the second floor for the following purposes. Kevin Cleary, 258 to 260 River Street, LLC, Coastal Area Management and Site Plan Revision, increase rear parking lot by 1,375 square feet, 55 feet by 25 feet, section 273-91 and 273-75. The Cottage at Lake Quanapog, LLC, Arti Lakshmi Shetty Nataraja, 286 Lake Drive, map 62, lot 11, zone R3, special permit, accessory apartment in a detached accessory structure, section 273-19. Create new zone, article 32, transition and service zone district 3, and amend zoning map 273-109. This is a recommendation of the Route 1 West Planning Commission. Create a new zone, article 33, gateway overlay district, and amend zoning map 273-109. This is a recommendation of the Route 1 West Committee. Copies of these applications are available for inspection in the office of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Town Hall South, 50 Boston Street, Guilford, Connecticut. At this meeting, persons may attend and be heard, and written communication will be received. Dated Guilford, Connecticut, this 12th day of January 2016. Richard Meyer, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. It's so nice to see so many faces, so thank you very much. I know it's lousy weather out and it's very stuffy in here, but try and bear with us, and I appreciate you being here. Tonight we have one missing commissioner. We're going to seat one of the alternates in his place. We're going to have George Underhill as a voting member. Phil Johnson is the other alternate. He's going to be participating, but he's not going to be voting on any of the things that come up tonight. First one in our public hearing is withdrawn. Mr. Piero Piccato, this is where we went for a walk meeting on Saturday. He's going to redraw his plans, I believe. So next up, we have the Cottage at Lake Quinnipiac. Can I get a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Jeff?
Good evening. My name is Jeff Beatty. I'm an attorney at 25 Boston Street. I'm representing the applicant. With me is Todd Anderson of Anderson Associates Engineering, and we're going to present the application.
Good to see you.
This is the application. This is our application for an accessory structure, accessory apartment in a detached structure, the property at 286 Lake Drive in Guilford on Lake Quanapog. You may recall we were here a few months ago in front of you with regard to basically the same application. That application was denied without prejudice. We've updated the affidavit and changed the design of the proposed accessory structure, which we'll walk through with you right now. So as I said, the application's for an accessory apartment and a detached accessory building. The accessory building that we're proposing to demolish and rebuild, the proposed structure has existed for a period of at least 10 years prior to application for the apartment dwelling unit, as evidenced by the date when the building was on the grand list, or other evidence of the date of construction acceptable to the commission. And I'd like to present to the commission a copy of the field card, which shows that the accessory structure that we're proposing to remove was built on or about 1930, so it meets that and satisfies that requirement of your regulation. And that is the structure that's on the premises currently has been there for over 10 years.
What was the accessory building used for 30 years ago, 19 years, whatever it was?
Well, it depends on who you ask. It looks as though it was used, it looks like a house, or it looks a very small cottage. It's got a chimney. To me, it looks like a house. It's got a front door, a couple windows, and a chimney. I've been told that it's been used in the past as a hunting lodge for somebody who go up and hunt around the lake. I don't know, it's been used for storage, I'm sure, but that's what it looks like to me.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And really, your regulations don't require that it has been used as a dwelling unit. It just says that the
I was
accessory
just curious
building
what
has been
the
there
prior use was.
for over 10 years. And you can see on the second page of the field card, I'm handing out the accessory structures. So shed, all three structures, I believe, they estimate to have been built in 1930. Do you know how they come up with that estimate? And if that's pretty accurate? Well, I think it's accurate because I think everybody, the neighbors and Mr. Anderson can attest that the building's well over 10 years. It may not have been.
It's very
built in
old.
1930, but
It's actually very rotted, so it is very old.
And I've got a photo of it. Happy to share.
Oh, we've seen that, yes. Cut down trees. Yeah. Right, right.
So the first condition under 273-19B is that subsection 1, subsection A, is that for applications for an apartment in a detached or partially detached accessory building, the accessory building shall have existed for a period of at least 10 years prior to application for the apartment dwelling unit, as evidenced by a date when the building was on the grand list of the town or other evidence of date of construction acceptable for commission. The field card has been used by the town, and that shows the date. And so I don't think there's any question that the building has been there for at least a period of 10 years prior to the submission of the application. So the applicant satisfies that requirement. The apartment dwelling unit is provided with at least one outside entrance as well as a bathroom and kitchen facilities separate from the single-family dwelling. And so if you look at the
Pull up the
this is a
entryway into a great room, bedroom, closet, bathroom, walk-in kitchen in here.
Jeff, you're talking about the proposed building, right? The
Yes.
current one doesn't have a kitchen or a bathroom, right?
correct.
Thank you.
And as I mentioned earlier, your regulations don't require that to have a kitchen or a bathroom. It just has to have been there. I apologize that the principle's small, but it's...
For the older members, you can't see.
So with regard to section 27319B2, we satisfy that requirement. Section 273-19B3 is that either the single-family dwelling or the apartment dwelling unit is occupied by an owner of the premises. And for purposes of this section, a dwelling unit shall be considered occupied by the owner when the unit is his or her exclusive residence for at least 9 months of the year. And this provision doesn't apply to a not-for-profit corporation exempt under section 501c3.
Could you speak up a little? Sorry, I can't hear you.
This provision does not apply to a not-for-profit corporation exempt from section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code, which the applicant is, while it's a limited liability company, is not a 501c3, which is typically a designation given to charitable or not-for-profit organizations. Now, a question that came up at the last hearing was, since the applicant is an LLC, how do we know that they're going to be used, and that it's going to be used as a principal residence? And then the affidavit that we submitted in support of the application was incomplete, so I prepared a new application signed by the member of the LLC, or a member of the LLC, that says that, I believe, satisfies the requirements of the regulations. I've got the original here, which I'm happy to give you, but I'm going to hand out copies to all the members, saying that they understand the requirements, that the members of the LLC understand the requirements of the regulations, and that they will comply with the requirements that they use the property, either the dwelling or the accessory apartment, as their primary residence in order to meet the requirements of your zoning regulations.
Are any members of that LLC occupying it?
Right now?
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
I don't think anyone is in there right now.
Oh, because of its condition, you mean? Is that why?
The house, they want to rehab it and add on to the house. It was in pretty poor shape to begin with,
Yeah.
and they haven't started much construction on it at all
Do they
yet.
plan to occupy it or rent it?
They're occupying, I believe they plan on occupying the apartment. But
you
we're saying that
identify
they're
that
going to apply,
person, or is
they're
it just-
going to occupy either the house
Is
or
it
the
an
apartment.
LLC member, one of those of that
Yes,
LLC?
and that's what the affidavit
Yeah,
says.
okay, all right.
And the dilemma, or not the dilemma, but the circumstance, which is not unique to this property, there are other properties throughout the town, both residential and commercial, that are owned by LLCs or trusts or partnerships or family corporations. So the entity that owns it may not necessarily be a human being. And so the question is, if it's a non-human owner, how do you satisfy this requirement? I take it to mean that a member or an owner of the company would have to use the property as their primary residence, and that's what we've tried to do, try to indicate in this affidavit. And there are a number of reasons why people would want to own title in an entity other than their individual names. Estate planning, limitation of liability, any number of reasons. I mean, trusts between a husband and wife, they may convey title to a trust that they own together. The trust owns the property, not the individuals. So the fact that this property is owned by an LLC doesn't make it unique compared to many other properties throughout the town.
How many members are there of the LLC?
It's a single member LLC. But that doesn't mean that we can't add additional members. The subsection 4 of 273-19B requires that the lot has an area equal to or greater than 40,000 square feet, or the minimum lot size required by the zone district, which is R3, and there's only one such dwelling and accessory apartment per lot. So I'll let Mr. Anderson address that.
We have 33,880 square feet, more or less, but it is in R3. And there is one existing structure which there is approval to add an addition over into the garage and make it one structure. So we're gonna have one structure and the proposed apartment.
And the minimum lot size for R3 zone is,
20,000 square feet, I believe.
so we exceed the minimum lot size for the R3 zone. Can we satisfy that requirement? Subsection B5 requires that off-street parking for a minimum of 3 vehicles is provided in the drive and/or in an accessory garage. And I'll let Mr. Anderson address that as well.
And we have an existing driveway right here, which we propose to add on. We have 2 parking spaces in the existing garage and an additional 3 spaces that we propose to add on to the driveway.
So a total of,
5 spaces.
so we exceed the minimum of 3 off-street parking for a minimum of 3 vehicles as required by subsection B5. Subsection B6 provides that the apartment dwelling unit has a minimum floor area of 400 square feet and a maximum area of 1,000 square feet. And then for purposes of this section, floor area shall be measured as the interior spaces to be used for the dwelling unit. There's no basement, so the provision with regard to basements accessible from the interior of the accessory apartment shall be counted towards the maximum floor area is not applicable. In addition, encompassing exterior spaces such as decks and balconies shall be shown on the special permit application. If we go back to the original drawing, you can see there's a deck that's proposed off the back, and you can see it in the renderings at the top of that map. But the total of the livable square area is over 400 square feet and less than 1,000, and then by my calculation, it comes out to 887 square feet. So it falls within the floor area requirements of your regulations, so we satisfy subsection 6. Subsection 7, any alterations or additions, including outside entrances, reasonably maintain the appearance of the building as a single-family dwelling and also do not result in any increase in nonconformity to these regulations. We're not increasing the nonconformity, and it does maintain the appearance of the building as a single-family dwelling, although this is a separate freestanding structure, so I don't know as this is subsection 7 is necessarily applicable to this application. Subsection 8, for an accessory apartment in a detached or partially detached building, the commission shall consider the proximity of the structure to adjoining dwellings and property lines. And I'll have Mr. Anderson address that aspect of the application.
We are going to be 48 feet from the side property line,
Which is well within,
well over the required setback.
In this region, it's 30?
We have a 12-foot minimum with a, what is it? 12 foot with a total of 30. So a 12-foot minimum. So we could be 12 feet from the property line.
So it's 36 feet farther.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, because it's a side lot line?
Yes.
Thank you.
subsection 9 doesn't apply because we're not in the R1 zone district, but still there's no more than 2 dwelling units on this lot if the commission would approve this application. Subsection 10, it says, where in the opinion of the commission, an accessory apartment is proposed in a structure that has historic or architectural merit or contributes to the historic character of a district or neighborhood, the commission may require that changes made to the appearance of the building be consistent with the historic or architectural style of the building and not detract from the contribution of the building to the district or neighborhood in which it is located. This is not in a historic district. I don't think it hasn't been designated as particularly meritorious or historic, neither the house nor the existing dwelling on, or structure on the outbuilding on the property. And then subsection 11 says for apartments proposed in detached or partially detached accessory buildings, the resulting building shall maintain to the maximum extent possible the appearance of the original building. Said building shall look like an accessory building such as a garage, barn, carriage house, or shed, and not have the appearance of a single-family dwelling. And this is, again, issue that was discussed at great length at the last application. We've redesigned the exterior of the building so that we've got these double doors here and here as the doorways to the building, so that it would look more like a carriage house or garage and less like a single-family dwelling. My feeling is that this is largely an aesthetic argument. Reasonable people can differ as to whether or not it looks like a single-family dwelling or a shed, but with regard to the objective criteria, so in that sense, it's a subjective decision that each individual commissioner will need to make. And one person could say it looks like it, and one person could say it doesn't look like a carriage house, and both could be right and both could be wrong. It's subjective in that regard. The objective criteria we satisfy.
Jeff, just in terms of increasing the nonconformity, you mentioned that
There's no nonconformity.
this doesn't increase any nonconformity at all.
There's no nonconformity right now.
So currently there's no nonconformity, and this would not increase it.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Lastly, subsection 273-19C provides that the application for the special permit shall also be accompanied by the following: an affidavit of ownership signed by the owner of the premises and affirming the intent of an owner to occupy either the single-family dwelling or accessory apartment. And that's the affidavit that I gave the commission just a few minutes ago. It's signed by a member of the LLC. The LLC is the owner of the property, and it affirms the intent of the LLC and the member to occupy either the single-family dwelling or the accessory apartment as the residence. Last, subsection C2 provides that a report prepared by and bearing the seal of a professional engineer verifying the adequacy of the sewage disposal and water supply systems for the single-family dwelling and accessory apartment. We have a sewage disposal permit, discharge permit signed by your Director of Health, Mr. Johnson, with regard to the septic system that was installed at the site last year for a 5-bedroom facility. So it's been reviewed by Mr. Johnson, and he's issued a discharge permit so that the septic system that's on premises is compliant with your health code and capable of supporting the proposed accessory structure on the site, in addition to the existing primary residence. So for those reasons, I believe that we've satisfied, as I said, the objective criteria of the regulations. I also believe that the revised design better satisfies the subjective criteria, and that what's being proposed looks like a carriage house or garage and less like a separate freestanding house. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Any questions?
Do you have a quick picture of the previous design? Just curious.
If you don't have it, I do.
The current, I mean the current.
Just as this, I mean, Jeff had mentioned if there was some redesign. Just curious to kind of have a before and after.
Maybe in the
Okay, thanks. Yep.
Is this ours?
Yeah. It shows affidavit single family. Jeff, where did you get this affidavit from? Did you make this up or is it from is it us?
I used your affidavit as a template to follow to incorporate the language.
Sorry for our affidavits. I was just pointing out to Josh that it says that this individual understands, but it doesn't say that they will comply with.
Can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I was pointing out to another commissioner that in line number 6, where it says they understand that they need to, a member of the LLC has to live there. It doesn't say that they intend to. It just says that they understand that.
That paragraph doesn't, but 7 does.
Yeah, number 7 says
If
the
I can read it
apartment
if
will
you
be
want.
occupied by a member.
Okay, good. Thanks, Jeff. Any other questions? Questions?
Are there any limitations in terms of the number of members that an LLC can have?
No. Same as any other one.
Is there any reason why this was notarized out of the country?
Because the person swearing to it was out of the country.
Other questions?
That was very diplomatic. She also lives in Bangalore or Basavareshwara, right?
Well, she's a United States citizen, so
I mean, that's where she's been living for quite some time.
I don't know how long she's been living there, but she plans on using this as a residence.
Well, Walter LLC is living in Connecticut.
The LLC
Counselor,
lives in that building.
and I'm sure that this is perfectly legal, but I'm just thinking, if I owned a structure that needed to be occupied by a member of an LLC that I was in control of, and I rented it to Mary Smith, and I said, Mary, as part of the rental agreement, you need to become a member of the LLC. There are no other requirements than the LLC admitting that individual as a member for Mary Smith to occupy it, right?
Right. The
And that's
risk-
perfectly legal.
Yeah,
Yep.
but the risk that you would have is that now Mary Smith owns the property with you.
Are there any hierarchy of owner of rights of a member of an LLC? Are they all, in other words, can you be a member of an LLC but not a owning of the property or voting right?
You can restrict the voting rights, but they still would retain an ownership interest in the LLC.
Perfect.
You can have 5% of an LLC, you could have a member.
1/10 of 1,000th of a percent too.
You could have different units of membership.
Yes.
It doesn't-
Right.
Right, so potentially Mary Smith could become a member at 1/1000th of 1% of the LLC. And so anyone could really move in here legally. Is that
As long
correct?
as they were a member of the LLC.
Right, and that scenario would hold true that they could be a member of the LLC just by the actual one member of the LLC admitting them at 1/10 of 1%.
They'd have to convey an interest in the
Yeah.
LLC to them.
How hard is that to do?
According to our interpretation of our code, they may also be buying into membership in a family, it turns out,
That's true, you're right.
which is
Well, good, thank you.
special and wonderful.
And I'm just trying to think all the possibilities. Other questions? And open it up to questions from the audience. Is that okay, sir?
Sure.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Sir?
My name is Tim Stone. I'm from Madison. I'm here with my friend Joyce. I think we all kind of believed last time that we talked that the LLC had a number of members. And now we find that it has one member. And there's one dwelling there that is unoccupied at the moment. Why is that member not happy to go live in that dwelling? What does that have to do if a member of that LLC, which is one person, wants to use that as a primary residence, why aren't they using that as a primary residence?
I think Mr. Anderson needs
It's
to
not
address
built
that.
yet.
No, not this. The building that's there, there's nobody in the building that's there.
That building is in severe disrepair, and they plan on doing the renovations and the construction of this building.
Was that building
All in
not
one.
renovated?
It was renovated partially, but not fully.
It was renovated and there was a renter that lived there.
I'm
It doesn't
not aware
matter
of that.
whether
I
or not
don't know.
they don't have to live in that property as it is. They've got every right to come in and make this application.
Yes, they do. But if there's one member who wants to use this as a residence. What's the deal with the second residence?
What's the deal if I own a property in my name and I want to build an accessory apartment to supplement my income?
Well, we're being told that the person, the LLC, has agreed that a member of the LLC will occupy the residence there. Is that correct?
Yes.
One
Or
of
the
one of the
apartment.
two residents. You-
One
They don't
or
have to
the
be
apartment.
by both.
So the other person, whether it's the residence or the apartment, does not have to be a member.
So anybody could rent the other
Absolutely,
place.
which would hold true for anything, though.
Which is presumably the financial value of the application.
So this is essentially not wanting to not having a place to live. This is to increase the value of the property.
To supplement income. I
Make
think
it-
we
make it a
talked about
commercial
this
property.
At the last time, that when this regulation was put into place, it was to aid people who were living in Guilford at the time that couldn't necessarily afford living in Guilford when
No.
you get older, and that's the
Right.
point of this procedure.
That's true for the procedure. The particular case, I think, does not satisfy that. But, I mean, I guess you guys are arguing the law, and all I'm saying is, the only reason why I came with my friend is I don't like bullies. And she has been bullied by this guy, and so,
This is a woman, Miss Arti Lakshmi Shetty
yeah, we're finding that out
Natarajan.
today. Yeah. His wife, you mean.
Is this his wife?
We assumed it was a guy. But you're telling us now that it's a woman, so is that his wife? Because Joyce has met the owner, and it was a guy.
The owner is a limited liability company.
And the owner of the LLC is Miss Arti Lakshmi Shetty Natarajan.
Well, just out of curiosity, who was the guy who Joyce met who said he had just bought the property?
I have no idea.
That's a mystery, isn't it?
Sir, I want to remind you that we are a body of rules and regulations, and so, you know, they are abiding by our rules and regulations as they are written right now. To answer your question, they don't have to occupy it right now. As long as a member of the LLC does, they've complied with the law. I'm sorry, I'll try to project better. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Carol DeVille, I live on Route 80 in Guilford. The question I have is, who will enforce this requirement that a member of the LLC, who we don't even know their name or what they look like or anything,
To some
if this is
extent,
accepted, how will you know?
it turns out if Miss Arti Lakshmi Shetty Natarajan doesn't file this as her primary residence on her taxes, then that will certainly become a question in April of 2017. Because at that point, of course, if she has decided to file from her, presumably what is her residence now, which is in
I don't know if the town can require them to get
Besavash,
copies in their tax
Waranagar. So in other words, the town can't actually enforce its regulations.
No, I didn't say that at all.
Beyond that, Walter, in the meantime, between now and then, the LLC could grow to other members.
Many members.
And we wouldn't even necessarily know.
Or would it be relevant?
That seems reasonably likely, since it seems as though the owner of the LLC at the last application was a different individual.
No, it wasn't.
No, it was the same.
The
It
gentleman.
was the same. It was the same person. It was already Chevy.
And even if, Walter,
So no man signed any of those applications?
I thought that person was referred to as he, the owner as he.
Counselor, I thought you referred to a gentleman in the last application.
I may have, but I'm not familiar with the names of.
But you're familiar with your client, certainly.
Yes.
But you've met a gentleman in these,
No, I haven't met it.
you've only met Miss, so the only
I've
person
never
that you've
met her
met.
either.
I have another question. So the accessory apartment or the house that exists now, the proposed accessory apartment, one of the two will be rented, yes?
That's
Is that-
likely.
Now, the question came up last time, and I'm asking it again. What will the duration of the rental be? In other words, is this going to be a seasonal rental, a weekly rental, a year-long rental? We talked about this last time.
Right. Regulations probably don't speak to that.
That's exactly right, they don't.
So then it could be just rented weekly during the summer.
Daily, monthly?
It could be
Yearly.
rented by the hour.
Well,
Oops.
our, it could just wait a minute, I think our current interpretation of our code may not allow for, may not even allow for daily rentals.
I have not read the code that says that. Jeff, are you aware of that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I kind of looked
There's
at
no
this.
restriction in regulation as to how long. I mean, there's many properties throughout town that are rented on a weekly basis, particularly as you get close to the water.
Right, and
Yes,
even some
weekly
less than
is
that.
very common.
Or even parts of a week, I would imagine.
Right. So our regulations really don't speak to the length of the rental period. But I think to answer the question more directly about who's going to be renting it, using the scheme that all you have to do is grant a very tiny percentage of the LLC ownership to whoever the renter is going to be, they meet the requirement. And that's perfectly legal. Those are our regulations.
Okay, so then in Guilford, if I had a gazebo that had been around for at least 10 years, I could apply to do the same kind of thing with it, or a tool shed, or, you know, a big birdhouse. I mean, the existing building is about 208 square feet, am I correct? And it's now going to be 800 square feet plus, so it will be 4 times as large. So if I lived on Sachem's Head or Mulberry Point and I fulfilled the rest of the requirements, I could do the same. So we could blow this up, right? Guilford could become
We're in.
cheap by job.
Yeah. Just as a comment, Guilford typically has been working towards having more places where relatives of people can live. I mean, there's an application tonight for another accessory apartment in a basement dwelling. We see these all the time, and what we're trying to do is encourage people to be able to afford to stay in town, like
Yeah.
sons and daughters of people that have lots. We had an application last month. This is not unusual.
Okay. Even though no one has ever lived, that's bought it, no member of the LLC has lived here yet. And no renovations have been done to the existing house?
Correct.
Those are all within our regulations, ma'am. And one other application for a way this could be considered is if you start to age out in Guilford and your income doesn't match the increasing taxes, which are forever going up, and you need to supplement your income, yes, you can, as long as you stay within zoning regulations, you can put an accessory apartment on your property. Yes, you can do that. And it's in place just so that people who are getting older can generate an income. Now, is this that exact case? No, but this fits under those regulations. As long as it fits in the regulations, it fits in the regulations. And Attorney Beatty has been very careful to point out how it does fit all of the regulations. Any other questions? Another question?
Joyce?
Yeah. My name is Joyce Donovan, and I live right next door. And I was told in the very beginning there were 3 members of the corporation, and the project manager brought over, quote unquote, the owner, because he was interested in looking at my house, maybe to buy it. I have the last existing cottage, on the lake. It's all original, and he was very dismissive of it because it was so small. He also mentioned his wife didn't like the lake. So I'm confused really who the owner is. And since you've never met the owner, you can't really help us.
The owner is an LLC. That's the
LLC, all right.
Of 1 member.
The LLC.
Currently one member,
Currently,
yeah. And we have her picture, and Walter could say her name.
Very good, Frank.
We also have just If you haven't seen this, there's also a copy of a valid United States passport.
And
Which is presumably why.
is the address this address?
She doesn't live there yet. I don't know.
The passport doesn't have an address on it. It doesn't require it.
We don't have her current address before us.
I have one.
It was notarized in Bangalore. And in, sir.
Yes, I don't mean to be argumentative, but I just want to understand what discretion this board has in making decisions. Are you saying that anybody who comes to you and falls within the guidelines will be approved to have an accessory building put on their property? They will be approved.
The only discretion that we have for something like this is number 11. And that is very subjective, and I think that...
I'm sorry, could
the
you,
only
yeah, but
discretion-
could you say what number 11 is?
For apartments proposed in detached accessory buildings, the resulting building shall maintain to the maximum extent possible the appearance of the original building. Said building shall look like an accessory building such as a garage, barn, carriage house, or shed, and not have the appearance of a single-family dwelling. And I believe that Attorney Beebe and the owner has successfully met that requirement with some of the changes. And to be honest with you, in my opinion, the application before was probably would meet this requirement, because a carriage house, I mean, you've all seen carriage houses, they look, in my mind, they look like single-family dwellings. So that's just my opinion, and I think that the updated property description is certainly more carriage house-esque than it was before, with two almost barn door front entrances. Esque.
So the little part where it says must look as much as possible like the existing building?
Well, that is
It
sort of
looks
the crux
nothing
of
like the existing building.
our review is the increase in the square footage. I mean, does something that is this much larger than the original building look like the original building?
But if you had an older cottage-style building and then you put this structure on it, would that meet the requirement?
I mean, they,
Have you all seen a picture of the existing building?
Yes. We have one right in front of us.
we've got a pretty good. The next.
What?
Yeah.
Would you read that again? Because, as Josh said, it's pretty...
For apartments proposed in detached accessory buildings, the resulting building shall maintain to the maximum extent possible
Maximum extent possible.
the appearance of the original building.
And
Se-
that's,
Go ahead, Walter.
no, no.
All right. Said building shall look like an accessory building such as a garage, barn, carriage house, or shed, and not have the appearance of a single-family dwelling. But to answer your question, short of that, we have no discretion unless there's a public safety issue with someone coming in here and making this application. As long as it's a building that's detached and been in existence for more than 10 years. Do we have a definition of building in our code? I looked, I didn't see one.
We have a definition of structure.
Yeah, structure is different. We use building. But that doesn't really matter, I don't really care.
It's a structure and a building.
There's a difference because we use them differently.
So I have a quick question on 11. Am I misinterpreting it to understand that if the... Heather Moore, 285 Lake Drive. Am I misunderstanding the way I'm reading it? But I'm assuming that if the original building was a barn, it needs to continue to look like a barn. If the original building was a garage, it would need to continue to look like a garage.
Well, I think that to the maximum extent possible is where you could bring in some sort of creativity as to how you want that structure to look.
Okay.
If it didn't have that language in there, you're probably right. But again, this is all subjective.
I understand that. I just think that the new drawing makes it look more like a garage, and that's not what it was originally. So, in my opinion, the way I interpret number 11 is it needs to continue to look like what the original building was. And if it was a shed, it should continue to look like a shed, not a barn, carriage house, or...
We'll sit on this side. Any other questions from the audience? Last chance.
Will this portion of the public hearing be closed? Continued to 2/17 for second hearing?
Could you just not do that for one moment? We do have a definition of building.
Okay.
We're going to have the definition of a building. What is that?
A structure which is completely enclosed by a roof and by exterior walls along whose outside faces can be traced an unbroken line for the complete circumference of the structure, and which is intended to be stationary on a lot or lots and used or intended to be used for the shelter, support, or enclosure of persons, animals, or properties of any kind.
Yes, sir, fits building.
Membrane structures, greenhouses, and pre-built or pre-assembled structures are included.
Wow, so that's everything.
Well, not a gazebo. So short of a gazebo, it is everything.
There you go. Tom, you want to go ahead with your motion? Or one more question? One more
I don't
question.
have a question, I have a comment.
One comment.
That, my name is Dawn Starr. I live at 309 Lake Drive, which is across the street. And I also provided you with some pictures of the existing building. Because I'm looking at that section 11, and I am interpreting it as it should be to the maximum extent possible the existing building. So when I started to think about what that would mean, I took into account the shape of the structure. Is it a cube, a rectangle, a circle? And the blueprint is not a cube, like the existing building. I took into account to the existing roof ridge line that's perpendicular to the road. And that ridge line has 1, 2, 3 different angles and shapes to it. I took into account that the existing structure has horizontal lap siding. This one does not. I took into account what the windows look like, which on the last photo you'll see what the windows look like. They're very dissimilar in number, shape, and size. I took into account the door that faces the roadway that looks like a human door could go through it, not 2 carriage doors on either end. I took into account the number and placement of windows and doors and the chimney material and type. So I have listed 7 things which, when I look at these pictures of the existing building and I look at the renderings, to me, do not make it appear to the maximum extent possible to look like the existing building.
Thank you.
That's my comment.
Thank you, ma'am. Last chance, anyone else?
Yeah, Heather Moore, 285 Lake Drive. I just want to speak to the size, which I think is my main concern with it. It's actually, going from about 250 square feet up to almost 1,000. On the drawing I have, it says it's 994 square feet. So when you include the deck, you're going anywhere between 5 and 6 if you include the deck into the size of the building. I think that you're setting a precedent. I mean, other people have mentioned it, and it's funny, but, can you turn an outhouse into a single family, into an accessory apartment? Can you turn a pig shed? I mean, I have those on my property. Can somebody turn an old doghouse into it? I think that the size is just extremely changing the feature of the neighborhood. Where it is, 4 out of 6 homes in this neighborhood are less than 1,000 square foot. So it's going to be as big as all the other homes surrounding it. It's in fact bigger than the footprint of the original house. The house has 2 stories, so it has larger square footage, but it's bigger than the footprint of the original house. So I think that the size is not right for the lot, and I think it's inappropriate to take such a small building and be able to make it so large.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, would you mind bringing us the overlay of the current structure and the current structure is in red there?
The proposed structure is in red. The current structure is shown here.
Yeah. Sorry. Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right, so has the commission received a copy of this one?
Yes.
Do you guys have a copy of the two structures overlaid?
You should have.
Not in our packet, file.
And we'll revisit that in deliberations.
Deliberations?
One more question?
Karen Strawson, 472 Lake Drive. With the existing structure and the new structure, it seems not feasible that this is only 5 bedrooms. You said that the septic is only for 5, is built to support 5 bedrooms. And this facility, this house that exists, is going to be rented. And the other end, what used to be a kennel, is going to be attached to it. It seems to me it's going to be a lot more than 5 bedrooms. And we're all very concerned because of Lake Quannapock and the problems we're having currently with Lake Quannapock, that we can somehow enforce the septic system being appropriate for the size of the dwelling. And there are so many unknowns here that we have no idea, and there doesn't seem to be a way to police the size of the dwellings. And our experience thus far as neighbors has been that this is do what you do first and then be reprimanded later. We saw that in
We haven't done anything. We're here submitting an application.
this is not meant to be an attack on it. This is an observation on the part of someone who lives in the area and is very concerned that we want to maintain the bucolic community that we have a very narrow road with bends, that having additional traffic can be potentially dangerous, that we have an unknown number of renters in this existing facility that may or may not be renovated and then attached to a longer, smaller facility, and then another building added. It's very uncertain, and it's very uncertain how that can be policed. So, I mean, we have a concern here for the aesthetic value of what was there, is there currently, and have no problem with somebody renovating the existing property. We just have a problem with the safety of the area, the safety of the lake, and not knowing who's coming into the community and what they want to do with that. So that's my point of view.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilor, this is on a town road, right?
Yes, it's on Lake Drive.
A very small, narrow road.
Nonetheless, a town road, I'm sure that meets the minimum requirements for the town roads. I don't know what those are.
I would imagine it does. I don't know.
I understand the concern about increased traffic, and that certainly is addressable in special permit applications. However, it is a town road. I live on Little Meadow, and it's kind of like a throughway. So I hear you on the traffic thing.
Yeah, this is not like that. And if there are large trees that are on property owners' lots that block the entrance to this particular property. So, I mean, it's...
I've been to the property myself personally, so I'm familiar with it. But thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just want, is there any limitation to how many people that can have in there at any one time?
I'm sorry?
Is there any limitation as to the number of people that can have in the occupancy? Could they make it into a summer camp or something? They have 20, 30 kids there?
There's a maximum number of bedrooms on the site of 5.
Yeah.
So it's,
Well, what
I'm not an engineer, but my understanding of the capacity of the septic system is based not on the number of occupants in the building, but on the number of bedrooms.
That's right.
And so the number of bedrooms restricts the number of typically.
Okay, and how many do we have here now, are going to have?
There are 4.
We got parking for 5 people, or 5 cars?
Yes.
So we could have an overload, huh?
I'm sorry?
If you could have an overload, more than 4.
I'm sorry, I can't understand what you're saying.
Well, I don't know if this thing is working.
That's for the TV.
That's for the TV, I want to know how many people you can use this property at one time. That's my question. And your answer telling me you got 4 bedrooms, you can have 4 people. Is that
No,
what you're
I
telling me?
didn't say that at all.
Well, what did you say, sir?
I said that the maximum how many people can use it at one time? How many people can use any property at one time? If I have a party at my house and I invite 20 people, there are 20 people using my house at that time.
I mean, on a more of a rental basis.
As many,
As many as it can hold?
that's no different than any other house.
I'm just asking a question, so that's all I ask. That's all I ask.
I mean,
That's the answer, fine, you don't know.
So,
I don't know.
So our regulations do not address how many people can stay in a bedroom, I believe.
Unrelated, I'm talking about.
Right, unrelated or whatever, you know, we just went through the Oceanco application where unrelated didn't matter. They were a family because they ate together. But, you know, potentially you could have 8 people sleeping in a bedroom. It's not addressed by the law. It doesn't address it. The septic system is sized on the amount of bedrooms and leaves everything else out unanswered.
Or what could be construed as use of a bedroom.
Right, you know,
I think there's a maximum occupancy by fire code or something.
I don't know that there is. You know, Guilford has a long history, and I don't come from money. I come from poor, and I remember that different people would use the bedroom at different times of the day. You'd sleep in shifts because you were poor, and that's what you did. Our regulations don't address that. You know, it's sized on the amount of bedrooms without regard to how many people are in the structure. You know, if
there are families where they have many children,
right,
so they double up or triple up in the room.
Yep.
I mean,
So
it's not unusual.
it's certainly not unusual. It's you know, anyone who
You can't answer that, but it makes sense. It's an unanswerable question.
Right.
It's not relevant for this
Exactly.
application.
Right, exactly. It's not relevant. You know, and every one of us has had a Thanksgiving dinner where we've had 20 or 30 people over, and you know,
45.
they're all in the bathroom all the time at my house, which is certainly disconcerting. But Chris, what happens?
A lot of flushing.
So,
We're up that track here.
sorry. All right. Any other last chance because we really need to move this along.
Well, you got it next time too. We got one more.
Oh, right.
Can I do my motion again?
Put
Do
your
it
motion
again.
down.
Do it again, please, sir.
Move that we close this portion of the hearing and for a second meeting on February 17th, the continuance of the public hearing to the 17th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so
By
much.
the way,
How
it
about
should
this
say,
thing?
in this room, right?
Yeah.
You might not
Say
want
here.
this
Yeah.
floating
No, I know.
around.
Something
Someone
else
collect
we
this
got.
all back. Yeah, I will.
Oh, you're fine. Thank you for coming. We appreciate your being here.
I know where mine's going.
Okay. All right. We are going to also continue the VFW application for 316 for the applicant. Can I get a motion to open Kevin Cleary, 350?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Mr. Cleary, Mr. Cleary, Mr. Cleary.
Mr. Chairman, just for the benefit of staff, I'd like to move that personally identifying information relating to finance be redacted from the file for the previous application.
Yeah, there is some some information that does not belong there in any way. And Counselor,
But staff can't, but the reason I just made that motion is just because staff can't alter applications.
Right.
So I literally didn't want to cross it out.
I know. So you probably should pass that. You need to obliterate it.
Well, you can have this back, so that way
Yeah, just take them. We don't need them.
Okay.
I've seen them.
You got one copy, they should redact it. These should throw away.
No, he's not here.
Good work, Jeff. Very complete. Make it easy for us.
Yeah, give us that.
I move we continue Mr. Cleary's because he's not here.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Do we have to continue to a certain time or? 17. It is. All right. So that brings us to the new zoning districts. We have a lot of guests from Route 1 West, and I ask that we open the public hearing for this.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
You're up, sir.
For the record, my name is Chris Whitmer. I live at 94 State Street in Guilford. And I am the chairperson of the Route 1 West Planning Committee. Just a brief background on the committee. We started a couple of years ago studying the Route 1 West from Joan Drive, or roughly where the new shopping center is, to the Branford line. We have, I guess maybe about a year or so ago, we had a design charrette. We invited people from the community to come, introduce ideas, et cetera. During that period of time, we made the decision to sort of, and for purposes of studying the area, we broke it into 3 separate zones. The first zone being essentially from where the TS2 zone is now to the Branford line, which we call the Gateway Zone. The second zone was actually the center where the commercial, more of a commercial zone, that's the TS2 zone. The third zone went from that TS2 zone to about where the shopping center is now. So those were the 3 zones we started to study. We submitted a report to Planning and Zoning that were basically kind of general recommendations in May last year, and then picked it up again at the end of the summer and started to look specifically at what changes we might recommend for zoning in those 3 areas. Now, when we started again in September, we essentially decided to focus on the first area, which is that gateway area, and that's from the Branford line to about where the TS2 zone is now. It's just, I suppose it's right around where the Gatehouse West is. That's the area. The zone is currently primarily a residential zone. There's quite a bit of residential property along the north side of Route 1. The south side is sort of a mix of residential and commercial zones, and different commercial zones. So one of the things we talked about and thought about was 2 things. One was to create some sort of a zone that would allow for some commercial development, but also in a sort of more restrained way. And I think George will sort of describe the zones next, but we came up with a TS3 zone, which would allow many of the uses in the TS2 zone, some of the uses in the TS2 zone, and not allow other uses that were objectionable to the committee. So, and then the other thing is to sort of enhance the development possibilities of the residential zone, the R7 zone, which is kind of on the north, primarily the north of Route 1. We introduced an overlay zone. And the overlay zone allows for additional uses on people's residential properties in that particular zone. So those are the 2 zones that we presented to you and that we'll be looking at this evening. Does that pretty much sum it up?
It does.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
As Chris hinted at, a lot of work has gone into the development of this proposal that you're hearing tonight by the Route 1 West Committee and citizens and other property owners in the district. You'll recall, as Chris mentioned, that a plan was presented to this commission, which was approved, and you authorized the Route 1 West Committee to begin to implement the plan, part of which includes the proposal that we're going to hear about right now, implementation through zoning.
When you say the plan, you're talking about the plan and conservation?
No, the Route 1 West plan.
Oh.
There are 2 proposed zone districts that are going to be discussed. Everyone should have a packet of 4 or 5 pages of material that includes the text of the 2 proposed zones dated December 23rd, and then also a map that looks like this. There are lots of copies around available if you don't have one. Lisa can get one to you. It'll help follow the discussion that I want to lead. I'll start by talking about the proposed Transition and Service Zone District 3, which, as Chris mentioned, is a new zoning district a commercial zoning district that will intended to replace the commercial design district, or CD zone, that exists on the south side of Boston Post Road between Moose Hill Road and the property where the Maritime Grill is located. It's primarily commercial zoning today, the so-called CD zone. This proposal will create a new zone district and then rezone those properties, which I'll get to with the map in a moment, rezone those properties to the TS3 district. The TS3 district is a zoning district designed to permit single-family and multifamily residential use and also limited commercial development. It's intended to encourage medium-density residential uses and also designed with low-intensity development principles in mind. The district is intended to allow limited commercial use, and I'll get into the details of that in a minute, and also preserve the rural gateway environment of that area of Guilford. That's an important part of this zone district. All developments that are proposed pursuant to this new zone should strive to preserve that rural gateway character. The new TS3 district allows a variety of uses which are listed on page 1 of this document. Dwelling units at 4 units per acre, farms, farm stands, buildings and facilities of the town and state, offices in existing buildings, personal service establishments, meaning beauty shops, barber shops, etc., offices in new buildings not to exceed 10,000 square feet, lodging establishments by special permit not to exceed 12 rooms, places of worship, retail stores, very limited types of retail stores selling antiques, consignment furniture, related goods, art, craft goods, and similar products by special permit. No single store larger than 5,000 square feet. No building larger than 15,000 square feet. Garden centers and landscaping products, restaurants, banks and financial institutions. Those would all be permitted uses or uses allowed by special permit in this new zone. The quantitative standards, the so-called location and bulk standards, are pretty typical of commercial zones in Guilford. 20,000 square foot minimum lot area, 100 feet of frontage, maximum building height of 40 feet, 30-foot setback from the street, 25 from the rear property, 12 side yard setbacks, 50 feet setback from residential zone district line, lot coverage 25%, total floor area 40, maximum impervious surface 45. This regulation makes provision for creating interior lots. Sign requirements in accordance with the normal sign regulations, parking in accordance with the normal standards. Some special language about trying to maintain to the maximum extent possible rural character when developing and locating parking lots. Parking that's screened from the road, shared parking is encouraged. All development should, as I mentioned before, strive to be to preserve rural character to the maximum extent possible. Signs made of natural materials and illuminated if required by indirect sources of light. Building materials, natural products and materials wherever possible. Landscaping installed to screen vehicles. Planting of street trees to be encouraged. Low impact development principles to be followed. Fences and walls are encouraged, especially fences and walls that add to the and enhance the rural character. Natural materials preferred. Stone walls also encouraged. Outdoor lighting to be minimized and be fully night sky compliant. Refer you to the map so you can see the district, the area that's being proposed. I know that these colors are really hard to distinguish from one another, especially the two shades of kind of pinkish. The lighter pink, what I call the lighter pink, that starts on the south side of Boston Post Road. You see Boston Post Road kind of cuts diagonally right through the middle of this drawing. On the south side, Moose Hill, you'll see Moose Hill Road, and then right next to that is a property that's labeled 2772. That's the beginning of the proposed TS3 zone. The light pink is the proposed area for the TS3 zone. It includes the next property, which is the former Broadway Mason property. It includes the next large piece. It includes a couple of small residential lots. It includes the next lot, which is where the gatehouse property is, and it includes several other lots further east over to the yellow zone, which is where the Maritime Grill is. So you have a continuous TS3 zone along the south side of Boston Post Road from the Maritime Grill to Moose Hill Road, as shown on this drawing. Okay. The second proposal that the committee is making is to create the Gateway Overlay District. You're all familiar with what an overlay district is. It's a zoning district that sits on top of, if you will, an underlying set of zones or zone districts. So it allows for additional uses of property within the overlay district in addition to those uses that are also allowed in the underlying zone. In this case, the underlying zone for the properties that are proposed to fall into this Gateway Overlay District are residentially zoned. The purpose of the Gateway Overlay District is to allow for additional development of residential lots, use of residential lots for those properties that front on the Boston Post Road. The concept being that in some cases those lots are not as desirable for single-family residential use as they used to be because of the increased traffic on Boston Post Road, and that this concept, this Gateway Overlay District, allows those property owners to, by special permit, request from the Planning and Zoning Commission the conversion of those residential buildings to other uses. That's the idea of the Gateway Overlay District. In addition to the uses permitted in the underlying zone, which are essentially single-family homes, this overlay district would also allow two-family dwellings in existing buildings. So if you have an existing single-family home, it can be converted into a two-family dwelling by special permit. Allows for offices, again, the conversion of existing buildings to offices. This zoning code, similar to another overlay zone that we have called the Village District, which is on Church Street between the Boston Post Road and I-95. This is kind of modeled on that same district. Allows the conversion of existing buildings, homes, to office, again by special permit. It allows for the expansion of those buildings by up to 20% of the floor area of the existing building, but with the provision that at least one dwelling unit is preserved in the building. Similarly, the personal service establishment can be created in an existing building, a residential building, subject to the 20% limitation and the provision of at least one dwelling unit. And also, this district would allow retail stores using language similar to what I just mentioned for the TS3, selling antiques, consignment, furniture, related goods, art, craft goods, and similar products. That also would be allowed by special permit. Design criteria, parking areas shall be located in the rear or side of the building, and shall be landscaped so as to minimize visibility from the road. Encourages gravel and stone surfaces for parking. In no case shall any lot have more than 50% impervious surface. Signs not to exceed 20 square feet and shall have a rural appearance. Internally illuminated signs are prohibited. New uses established under this section should be designed consistent with the purpose of this district to preserve the rural character. Referring again to the map, you'll see on the north side of the Boston Post Road, starting over on the east side, right across the street from the Maritime Grill, this new district extends westward to include the frontage properties all the way over past Jefferson Drive, including 2 lots west of Jefferson Drive, and then also includes several lots on the south side of the Boston Post Road from the eastern edge of the MUC1 zone, which is the area that's crosshatched in blue, over to the Moose Hill Road intersection, which again is the beginning of the TS3 zone, extending eastward.
And that's both sides of the road?
No, the overlay zone only governs on the north side of the road, except for those lots that are west of Moose Hill Road on the south side, from Moose Hill Road to the MUC1 zone.
For those last 2 properties right before the MUC1, the coloring is also just Gateway overlay, not TS3, right?
Yes, that's correct. Moose Hill Road, the only TS3 is east of Moose Hill Road.
Gotcha.
To the west of Moose Hill Road, that's intended to be the overlay district.
What was the overlay district? Is that currently, is that a TS2?
No, it's all residential.
R7?
It's R7, and I think on the south side it's R8. The north side is R7. I believe it's all single-family residential.
And just for everybody's reference, R8 and R7 are 4-acre zoning for R8.
Right.
And R7 is 2-acre zoning.
Good. I have a question about the TS3 zone, and I just don't understand exactly, and maybe it's one property, but I guess the furthest south small parcel is number 2590. Why is that included in the TS3? Because it doesn't have any frontage for the Boston Post Road. It's the only property. Was that all one?
It's contiguous to the CD, the CD zone, which is where that's the Gatehouse West property.
Yeah.
That has the building there that you can see kind of shaded. The commercial development goes all the way to the back. So this lines up with the back of that commercial development. So this was also part of a petition way back when by the owner of that property to include that within the commercial zone. So this is consistent with that. That's why that line kind of lines up with the back part of the CD zone today. Those lots are all zoned residential today.
Is that the lot that is listed as number 2 right below it? Is that still the same lot?
No, that's a separate lot.
Was at one point those 4 lots that make up the front of 2590, was that all one lot at one point and it was split?
Say that again.
So the 3 lots that are in front of 2590.
Yeah.
Was that?
Those are all separately owned lots.
Those are all separately.
Well, I believe they are.
At one point, was that ever one big lot, including the 4?
I'm sure it was at some time, but I
Sure,
don't know the
guess.
history. I don't know the history.
Okay.
Excuse me, I have the answer for
Oh,
that.
great.
Okay.
Can we have your name for the record, please?
Dorothy Collini.
Thank you.
At 2556 Boston Post Road. Okay, those lots were once owned by one family, the Collini family. And then the back lot was given or bought by the son of the person who owned the other lots there. And then what happened was that the original owner passed away, and what happened was that the person that owns the Gateway House condominium, he bought the back lot. And when the original owner also died, this other lot, which is 2560.
Yep.
That was another heir to the original owner, and she sold that lot to the person that now
owns Gateway, so he now owns Gateway and the 2 lots here.
The bottom lot and the one with the
And the
frontage.
one right
With the
beside his condominium.
George, what's the number of the lot between number 2560 and the what I always call the driving range, which was never a driving range?
It was.
Was it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, between 2692, the big driving range, and the property to the east, number 2560. The middle numbers aren't present.
That's Gateway, that's the Gateway commercial development.
It's the Gatehouse.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Gatehouse West or
and the-
whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Victor Anopoulos.
Does it have a number?
I'm sure
It
it
must
does.
have.
I'm sure it does. I don't.
Okay.
It's not on
Unless
the-
it's part of that 2590. It might.
Yeah, it can't be.
I don't know.
It may have 2 numbers because.
It probably has multiple numbers, right?
Yeah, it's got 2 numbers.
Does that answer your question?
Can we just put the, just for next time, can we just put the numbers on there so that we know what we're...
Sure. Yep, that completes my presentation of this.
Questions?
I just one.
Me?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell me why the parcel to the farthest west of 2839, you know, there's Jefferson Drive and that's 2 more. This looks to be a fairly significant parcel. Why was that not included?
It's the white area.
That's the TS2,
That center, right?
yeah.
That's part of the summer. Not Tractor Supply, for the redevelop, they came in here recently, actually. Right, did they come in here for redoing the whole facility?
No, that's not, no, that, I'm sorry, Tractor Supply is over at the far left there, which is in that little sort of yellow color. That's a large undeveloped residentially zoned parcel. I think that's owned by Siseskis.
It's R7.
Yeah, it didn't meet the intent of the overlay zone, which is to allow property owners who have residential lots and residential dwellings who feel that their properties might not be as marketable, desirable, saleable as single-family homes because of the change in the character of the road over the last many years. And that property doesn't fit into that category. I think that's the logic.
Excuse me, Tony Cullen, does the Siseki own number 2839? Is that their property, or is their property the light green to the left?
I think it's to the left.
The white one next to the TS2.
That's the one that you...
Yeah, I believe,
Right.
I believe so, yes.
It's currently in R7.
Yes.
So they weren't included in this here, or...
Right, that's correct.
The Siseski farm stand is certainly in that white area.
Yes.
Would there be a drawback to us adding Mr. Siseski's farm to the overlay zone?
If there isn't an existing single-family dwelling there, it doesn't make any sense because this is only applicable to existing single-family homes.
What has a single-family?
I don't know.
What if we put them in the TS3 zone?
Well, that would be a radical change.
Well,
Yes.
that's even worse. Well,
There's a lot of
there's
wetlands.
that road right there.
There's a lot of wetlands on that property also. I don't know where their house is. I'd have to do a little, I'll check that out before the next hearing. I don't know for sure.
To the point though, George, what you're saying is that this is a large piece of property, undeveloped.
Right. It could be subdivided into multiple lots or some other kind
Yes.
of development pursuant to the current zone.
Could be, yes.
What's it zoned to R7?
Seven.
So the point of this overlay district is for the people that have the smaller lots
Right.
directly on the road.
Right.
And it gives them some options to do something with that property that they don't have now.
Correct. That's the idea. This idea came out of the planning committee, of course, and, in all their deliberations and the charrette that was held.
Well, it's important to note that one of the concerns originally was that with all the people that are on the West End, they're just going to want to not have any development. And clearly, they're promoting sensible and thoughtful development.
Good.
So this is very, very good.
I know you'll probably hear more about this later, but let me just expand a little bit on the TS3 zone. One of the things, the TS3 zone, most of that property now is in this zone called CD, which most of us don't have a whole lot of familiarity with. It was a zoning district that was developed many years ago. Came out of a planning process. It was designed to encourage higher quality design. It was designed to allow properties that are kind of on the edge of residential areas to be rezoned for commercial use. The CD was intended to be a more restrictive type of zone, that when a property was rezoned, it was rezoned for a specific purpose, not for a whole long list of uses that are typically allowed in a zone, but only for the specific purpose that the property was rezoned for. But the zone district also then describes uses that are allowed within that zone. And then it talks about a process for changing from one approved use to another, which is sort of tantamount to like another zone change. And it's a very, in my opinion, poorly drafted law, and it's very problematic in terms of administering it. It's problematic from the property owner's point of view because it's not really clear what they're allowed to do other than what it was originally approved for. There's some examples of the CD zone, aside from this one. One you're all familiar with, the Rothberg office building down at the marina is a CD zone. That property was specifically rezoned to CD, I gather. I wasn't here at the time, but specifically rezoned to allow an office building to be built there for that. And that's solely what it was rezoned for, and then, of course it was built that way. CD zone also includes the Guilford Savings Bank property on Park Street, and also Town Hall South, ironically enough. It includes property over on the other side of the green, where the Green Gallery is, and what used to be Whitfield's Restaurant, and that little complex of buildings. That was, I guess, originally zoned residential, and it was rezoned CD in order to permit the commercial development that's there now, or expansion of some commercial development that was there before. So it was very limited. This big piece that has the unusual shape here, which you'll probably hear more about in a few minutes, was zoned CD in order to permit a golf driving range, which is why it has this kind of unusual shape like this. That property, that land zone CD now, it's been felt by the committee and also by a number of other people for a long period of time, would be better off placed in a more conventional type zoning district, whether it's TS2 or TS3, which is a new district, or some other district that works more like a typical zoning district in terms of the process for changing, was felt to be desirable, just by way of background. Any other questions for me?
Just as a side note, we think it might possibly also violate state statutes, CD zone. The way it's drafted, I mean, it just doesn't really match with the law.
Little thing with the law.
Well, what does?
That's true.
Well, the rest of the zones are a lot closer to.
Sometimes. In certain interpretations. Well, good, George. Thank you.
I want to talk about two, or at least one. Just while I'm here, mention this. Because several people pointed this out to me, and talking to people about this. There's something that's kind of confusing about the TS3 zone. Use number 5 and use number 7. 5 talks about offices being allowed in existing buildings with additions of up to 10%, and within those buildings, one dwelling unit shall be provided. And then number 7 talks about offices being allowed in new buildings, not to exceed 10,000 square feet. And I don't really recall in our discussions why we had those two separate items. I mean, either offices are allowed in this district or they're not allowed. And it seems to me that there's some confusion by writing it the way we did with this provision to allow offices in existing buildings, and then a second provision to allow offices in new buildings. It almost seems to me that we should eliminate this number 5, go to number 7 and say offices in buildings, whether they're new or not. I don't know why it makes a difference, not to exceed 10,000 square feet. So I believe that that's a kind of editorial correction that should be made to this. Excuse me.
I'd like your thought on why you would allow for a 10,000 square foot office and only allow, you would allow for a 15,000 square foot building, but only allow for a 5,000 square foot retail space. That doesn't make, that to me doesn't make sense.
Well, actually, that some people have pointed that out. Why would we allow 15,000 square feet for a retail store, but only allow 10,000 square feet for an office?
You don't. No, I said you allow 15,000. You could have a building that's 15,000
right,
square
but only
feet.
one store up to 5,000.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Right. You could have 3 5,000 square foot.
Well, I understand that, but I don't understand it.
Right, why are you limiting it to 5?
Theoretically, if you're going to allow for a 10,000 square foot office, I don't think the impact in it between it. There's a lot of difference in impact between a 10,000 square foot office and a 10,000 square foot retail space.
Yeah, but we actually have the Route 1 West Committee here, and maybe they can offer a little guidance to us.
Might shed some light on it. Keep in mind that the retail stores that are allowed in this zone are extremely limited in terms of type of store.
Yep.
And one of the things we did talk about was that stores that sell furniture in particular tend to be quite large.
Yes.
Given the type of product that's sold, and many people. And I think there's a store, actually it's over in Brantford, that people pointed to as maybe a model. I've forgotten what it's called. It's right across the line there. It's kind of an antique store. And,
Clock
shop. Clock shop, right. And it's, you need a lot of space when you have furniture. So the committee did discuss this, and they felt 5,000 square feet was big enough.
Interesting. Well, good. Maybe
at some point I'd like to go to a meeting with these people, because I could show you some numbers.
Right.
To say that 5,000 basically doesn't work for retail anymore, period.
Too small.
Maybe someone from Route West could offer us some guidance in where this came from, how it evolved, and what it means. Would anyone like to shed some light for us?
Well, I'd rather not be the person, but...
You're elected, Ann.
Well, my name is Ann McIntyre Launer, 2577 Boston Post Road, and I'm one of the West End residents that sat on the West End Committee. And I guess for me, I'm going to take the liberty, if you let me, before I answer that question, is kind of make it clear where those of us who live on the West End were coming from. So, Chairman Meyer, you made a comment earlier on about people not wanting a lot of development down there, but what we put forward shows responsible development. And I think for me in particular, and maybe some of the other people on the committee want to speak up, but yeah, I prefer not to see development. But I also realize I can stick my head in the sand and then we'll have Hamburger Hill like they do in Brantford, and I don't want that either. So that's why I sat on the committee, was to be able to have an impact on the type of development that goes on. And I also want to stress some of the language that we made sure that we put into the proposal, and that was really to try to keep the rural feel that we have on the West End and to encourage agricultural type businesses over some others. The reason why we've had the smaller size for the store, we don't want big box stores or even little box stores. Maybe 5,000 square feet is the wrong amount, but we're really looking to keep the small town feel that is Guilford. When you drive into Guilford from Brantford, this is the gateway. There's a sign, you may have noticed it, says, "Welcome to Guilford, an agricultural community since," I don't remember what year. Thank you, I'm glad you all remember, but it's been a long time. And so that for some of us who served on the committee, the idea was we understand that this is one of the areas of town which is currently less developed, which makes it right for development. We want to manage that. We don't want to become Hamburger Hill. We don't want it to feel commercial.
Right, and you know, I'd like to address, or acknowledge, more importantly acknowledge, you know, Route 1 West had a stormy start. And one of the concerns when it was reconfigured to represent more local residents was that it was going to be no, 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 we don't want that, it's just good the way it is. And I really want to compliment everybody, because certainly you have risen to the challenge and come up with a really excellent plan. You know, there are some, you know, Tom does retail, he knows how that things work, and I'm sure he has input as to what's too small, what's too big. And on the other side of the fence are the folks who live in the area who don't want a huge giant store. So, you know, one of the things we do is we sort of hash it out and come up with a happy medium. But I am so thankful that I don't have to start with no, 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 there's no development anywhere, we just want it to be the way it is. So my compliments, and Chris, my compliments to you. Excellent, excellent job. I'm thrilled that this is here. You know, so she's talking about how she wants to try and limit big box and even medium box out.
Can I just add one?
Go ahead.
Somebody to my left said, what about Tractor Supply? And hallelujah, I hear that. That happened before the West End Committee. I shopped there, I'll admit it.
Point taken.
But I shopped at it in Old Saybrook, and I was much happier driving to Old Saybrook to go to Tractor Supply. It doesn't fit the character of that end of town, and it was a great disappointment when it came in, and when the people who had been on the West End Committee before its current iteration, the neighbors, you know, asked for more, did not want a large sign. They came in, they said, we need a bigger sign. Guess what? They've got a bigger sign. Yeah. So I feel, as someone who lives down there, the need to say that is not what I am looking for continued expansion on that end of town. That is much more commercial than fits the character of that part of town.
So allow me to address that just for a second, because I have pretty strong feelings about this. You know, we have a pretty strong economic development push in this town, and it ignores what the people who live here want sometimes. I hear you about that sign. We approved, I think it was an 88 square foot sign, and the very first thing they did was went to Zoning Board of Appeals, and their hardship was that the road had a curve in it. Did you not know the road had a curve in it? The answer is, of course they did, but they wanted a bigger sign. And sometimes it's a little frustrating for us to say yes to something and then have someone else say, you know what, we're going to change that. And I apologize for that. And so I hear you, and one of the reasons that Route 1 West exists is because I really want to promote this town being responsive to the people who live here and giving them what they want. This is our town. It doesn't belong to anyone else but us. So, you know, the risk going into this for me was to start this initiative of neighbors being on this board and then coming back with absolutely no opportunity for development. And you rose to the challenge and did a great job. I think that this kind of board is the example of what could be for other parts of this town. There are going to be pressures on our friends who live over on Goose Lane there. That's the next area that's going to be developed, like it or not. And so they should take this guideline as a template for what could be there. And overall, bigger view in this town is that this town belongs to the people who live here. And so good job. You took control of this. We're going to sort through this, but we want to try and honor your wishes. So what are the questions? You have more questions. You're coughing at me, and I know you get frustrated.
No, I'm not having questions. I want to comment that in some of the other districts, and there are zones where we give bonuses to, in terms of what you can do because of the architectural element that you put into the design. And I'm here to tell you that you could design a building that looks like it's 5,000 square feet, but if you do it properly, it can be bigger than that. And it doesn't look anything other than a 5,000 square foot building. And so we have zones where, we have zones where if you do a certain kind of house, am I right or wrong about this? You get an extra lot, for example? So,
We have the,
It's the open
the
space.
so-called open space
Right.
subdivision. Yeah. that-
and if you encourage people to do things in the right way, that you give something back to them for doing that, is all I'm saying.
Thank you. That's great. Any other questions down here, gentlemen? Comments? No?
I'd like
This
to-
is, by the way, this is great.
I'd like to ask
I'm not
about-
knocking this,
about the
don't get me wrong.
traffic. It being a big highway, you got a lot of traffic problems, like, I'm listening to some of the neighbors down there saying they're running need stop signs or slow down sign. There's no way to get from one side to the other. And I was wondering if the committee has addressed that with the state or federal, whoever controls the traffic patterns on Route 1. Sir, do you have something on that?
Yeah, I can speak to that.
Yeah.
We, so this, and Frank reminded me, this zone that we're talking about this evening is really the first part of three zones. So the next zone is the current TS2 commercial zone. And we did talk about traffic calming through that area via the introduction of sidewalks, landscaping, the potential of having a crosswalk, especially in the next zone, the TS2 zone, that might even have a flashing light or something that allows traffic to kind of be regulated. So I agree with your assessment that traffic is an issue, and the speed limit there is 45. It's a fairly rapid moving zone. And so we will probably be before you again to talk about the next two zones as our work goes forward. So.
So you still recognize that as a
yes.
problem you're going to address. I could. Thank you.
Chris, if I remember correctly, you were thinking that some more, not intense, but more buildings on either side of the road tends to cause people to slow down. And so this kind of development would sort of naturally start to slow things down a little bit. But, you're right, there needs to be a way to cross the street. And I'm sure that you're going to move in that direction. What other questions do we have?
As a note for the members of the public who are here tonight, specificity helps us a lot when it comes to, for instance, highly specific objections or highly specific edits that that you may prefer to this document. If you make a reference to A8 and how that number really should be different, that can really help to focus the conversation. As you go through this, I see that we passed out copies, especially in the upcoming 2 weeks. If you, for instance, email Lisa at planning.zoning at something completely
.ct.us.gov.
No, CI.
CI? Oh, CI Connecticut, right, there's an I.
CI.field.
Google search it.
It's on the website under Planning and Zoning Commission. It's a link at the bottom. And also, of course, hard copies, but just in general, if you have, it's likely that you'll have input that relates to line items in this. So rather than a general statement, if you have a line item, it will really focus us on your point a lot more, on your interest a lot more.
Thanks, Walter. That's good.
So what's our next steps here?
We'll get a little public input right now. I'm sure they're dying to tell us. And then we'll come back in the next meeting and we'll chew on it some more.
Okay.
Let's open it up to questions, comments.
Name and addresses, too.
And also, yes, Frank's right. We need to get names and addresses. You go first, sir.
Everybody?
Thank you, sir. Great tomatoes last summer.
Yeah.
Right up. Take one.
Anthony DeLucia, 2692 Boston Post Road. That's the old driving range.
My property has been owned by my family since 1956. I've resided on said property since 1989, and it's been zoned commercial since 1990. The newly proposed zone, TS3, drastically restricts development compared to CD zoning, thus making my property much less valuable. Yet the West End Committee wishes to incorporate a new village overlay district zone which enhances the value of their property, of which I would not be opposed for them, as I have not opposed the development of Mr. Anatra's nor Old Broadway property. To date, I have not developed my property, although I have always had the right to do so, and I've paid for that privilege through higher assessments and taxes for over 2.5 decades. With the stroke of a pen, the Planning and Zoning Committee stands to wipe out a significant portion of my estate. This is de facto taking of my property without compensation. Will the town refund me for 2.5 decades of tax overpayments of commercial zoning? Any common man, realtor, or appraiser would agree that the change in zoning would have an adverse effect on the property value. So I will vigorously resist any change in the current and long-standing commercial zoning classifications. The changes will leave me little alternative but to litigate a zoning change which limits my development alternates and depreciates the value of my property. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter. I just wanted to make a side note. I attended several of the West End Committee, and they did a fantastic job. They put a lot of time in. But during that time, I did offer a TS2, as was granted to Sullivan, that allowed Tractor Supply, that was granted to Mr. Anatra next door to me. Mr. Anatra was the primary designer of the TS3. That was his idea, because he has interest. He has, like he always said, he has a lot of skin in the game. And I don't blame him for wanting me to go TS3, because it would be less of an impact than commercial. But like I said, I have no intentions of developing my property at this time, but it's for my daughter and my niece. So.
Sir, are you promoting that you would be a TS2 then?
I would be willing to have TS2, and I would be also willing, as I stated to Mr. Kroll, that I would be willing to eliminate anything to do with automotives.
Are we talking about this? Question for staff,
would this actually lower Mr. DeLucia's assessment? Could this potentially lower the tax assessment on the property as compared to CD?
That's a hard question to answer. It's not really one I can answer. I think the question is, does it reduce the value of the property? In theory, if it reduces the market value of the property, then the assessor should follow up in accordance with whatever their normal process are and reduce the assessment accordingly. So the real question is, does this proposed zone reduce the value of the property?
Could you have the assessor come in one of these meetings and just go through that?
What do you think?
I wouldn't mind asking him, quite frankly, take a conversation with him.
You have subpoena power? No, I doubt if he would be willing to do that. But you can ask him.
All right.
We could ask him.
invite him nicely.
So
on the map that we're looking at, what are the parcel numbers that are yours?
2692.
The big one, the driving range, the long one.
It's this one.
Well, what Old Broadway?
What are the other that's the corner Montana's, the restaurant, and right next is Saks property.
Which is
With this, do you think that this also reduces the likely externalities to your property from the Anatra property, or you think it makes no difference in terms of what the Gatehouse West property will be like? It seems like it already is what it is. Are you concerned about any kind of increased nuisance from the Anatra property after this zone?
No, not at all.
You're
That's why I
concerned-
never opposed Mr. Anatra in any of his proposals.
You are concerned that the CD, you believe this commercial design district as it's drafted right now makes your property more valuable than
TS3.
Than TS3. I have no idea if that's the case.
Well, just look, if you look at the chart with the restrictions compared to what I can do on CD compared to what I can have would be forced for TS3, I mean, it's a drastic change.
But CD is just so deeply confusing. I don't know what you can
And
do
that's
on
why I
CD.
would be willing to go TS2, like that was granted.
Can you give us an
also.
example of one thing that you could do for CD zone that you couldn't do for the TS3?
Well, you could get larger office buildings. You know, you could get.
So how big of an office building could you get in a CD zone?
That's. I don't think there's any restrictions, believe it or not. Just like the tractor supply, and that tractor supply was TS2.
Because his property could be uniquely affected because it's just so much larger than the other properties. That really could be true, or it could be that CD doesn't really do that much.
So, I mean, laundromats, no. Retail dry cleaners, no. And yes, these would be allowed in TS2 and CD.
Wait, in CD you'd be allowed.
Skilled nursing facilities, no, on TS3. But they're allowed, they're allowed in TS2.
Well, but right now you're CD.
Right.
So you think that the current CD zone would allow you to get a laundromat or a retail dry cleaning?
Yes. And like I said, I would, the only thing it doesn't allow is self-storage facilities, but that's not allowed in the TS3 either.
Well, why wouldn't we, I mean, all the way till that Moose Hill Road, it's all relatively commercial property. Why wouldn't we just extend the TS2 and then do the overlay over the...
TS2, in spite of our former Route 1 West chairman's statements, is actually pretty intensive on a lot of levels. It allows, for instance, car washes.
Well, that's what I would be willing to eliminate.
Well, we can't just, we'd have to just have to redo the TS3 zone. We can't go back and redo the TS2 zone.
We could, well, but we also don't have to extend the TS2.
No, I know, that's what I'm saying. We'd have to, but we couldn't give you a special TS2 zone.
But the other thing is, like, the town and state are looking for affordable housing, but yet under TS3 it goes to 4 units per acre. Under TS2 it's 6 units.
Yeah, if there was affordable housing, there might be some overlays for affordable housing in certain zones. So that would sort of mitigate that issue.
Well, the TS3 just allows for 4 per acre, and it's right here in writing.
Yeah. We would put an overlay.
The issue, let me just try to clarify. What TS or CD allows a wide variety of commercial uses by much more intensive commercial uses than the TS3. Doesn't have the limitations in terms of building size that the TS3 has. The difference is in the process for changing from one use to another. The CD is not a conventional zone that has a bunch of permitted uses that's subject to site plan you're allowed to develop. Each new use has to go through a zone change, in effect, a zone change process with all the discretion that the Planning and Zoning Commission has with regard to any zone change. That's the way it's written. Whether that's legal or not, is the question.
So if it's CD now, and that's come back here for what is equivalent to a zone change,
right?
If we're not amenable, then his property
That's
has no great
that's
value.
that's the kind of unknown, and that's the unknown and the kind of issue associated with CD. It has that potential, which could be very negative for the property owner. The one area in which the TS3 is more liberal than the CD, notwithstanding that issue, is with regard to housing. The TS3 allows much greater density for housing than does the CD zone.
But less than TS2.
Less than TS2, but more than CD. And one of the things I think the committee feels is that encouraging or providing for multifamily housing in this area, even though it's a commercial zone, is a good thing. And that's why I think they felt that it would be desirable to have a more liberal provision. It's not a special permit by right, 4 units per acre, so you can do the sewage disposal. That's moderate density, and that's not as dense as TS2, but it's still more than just about anywhere else you can do.
I'm referring to senior housing.
Any kind, it doesn't matter. It
I
can
mean,
be-
there is a statute on the book, I'm sure you're well aware of it, that allows you to go over any zoning laws that you have if you have affordable housing.
Right, oh yeah, right. And that's not, we're not talking about that.
Say, 3 or something like that.
Right.
I just want to note something.
8-30.
Excuse me. On August 14th, 2013, Mr. Kroll, Mr. McClone, myself, and Mr. Guarino met at the town hall, and at that time, we were offered to change from CD to TS2. There's only one reason why Mr. Guarino and I refused, and that was because the rumor had started about the propane. And we thought that going to TS2 would allow that propane on the corner at where the Montana house is right now. So that's why we didn't. Otherwise, we would have accepted the TS2.
Well, I mean, a similar offer was also made to 2772 BPR LLC for the propane, but obviously they didn't have the power to make such an offer because that didn't happen. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the Planning and Zoning Commission certainly is the organization that chooses those zones. The thing about this is I'm just not sure that CD is actually what you're currently zoned for. I'm just not sure how much it's really doing for you. I mean, I'm not sure that commercial design district is legal in a grand sense. It's certainly confusing and difficult just from an administrative level, but also I'm not sure that it's actually I'm not sure at all whether or not it's changing the value of your property as compared to what the Route 1 West
Well, I'm
group
having
is.
my property appraised now just for that reason. And then if it is changed to TS3, I'm going to have it reappraised, and that's why it'll be settled in litigation, which I hope it doesn't go that far.
Can you tell us, like, what components of the TS2 zone or the TS that you like that aren't in the TS3 zone, and what components of the TS3 zone that you're concerned about that you wouldn't want to have in the TS3 zone?
Well, the size of the office space and the housing.
As compared to CD?
No, from the TS3 to TS2.
Well, but you're not currently zoned TS2, just in terms of, because you're talking about a taking here.
Right.
So you're talking
Well,
about.
let's forget about the letter that he wrote, and let's try to figure out where it is he has issues, and to see if
My issue is I've been paying taxes on
Okay.
the CD for two and a half decades.
But in terms of
It sounds more like a deliberation discussion. We have lots of other people who probably want to testify on this issue.
Right. So we're going to talk this out, and we're going to also be back here in 2 weeks.
Okay.
So come back with more information.
I
And
will.
then, thank you for letting us know about Mr. McGlone making that offer. A serious concern of mine and everyone else on this board. Who else has a question or some input? Sir?
Underneath the permit use, number one, just asking the question here. You got 4 units per acre. At one time, I lived in that area, you had to have 3 acres for a house. Now, this is a quarter of an acre per house. I guess my question is that when you get to that extent, and the concern that years ago was the drainage, the sewage drains, septic tanks and all of that. How does that play into this water of an acre now all of a sudden? Or are you saying that these people here shouldn't drill wells, they have to connect to the water system in the road? That's the kind of
address that with
All right,
the
this doesn't say, this doesn't.
Okay, we're gonna switch tapes. We won't do anything. We're gonna come back and answer that question.